Yeah, I mean, we can get started. I will say to everybody who's joining us, we are recording this for later, as we had just mentioned. So if you do not wish to be recorded, you can either exit now and watch it later, or, certainly turn off your camera. But we are going to be recording it. And then I am also going to turn off everybody's cameras as well, so that Mr. Standish can ask Sarah some questions, and they can talk a little bit once I show the trailer. So a little bit later, we're going to ask for Q&A. So I will enable the chat. And if you have any questions, raise your hand in the chat. We'll get to them in order, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We're really excited to have Sarah join us. The movie is great. I hope everybody has already watched it, but if not, I did post a link, and I'm happy to share the link again with how you can see it. And I'm going to share my screen and show everybody the trailer. So
why don't I read Megan's biography? Just let everybody know, what she's been up to, and this is her official biography, very short. It's on on the internet, and says here, Sarah Megan Thomas is an actress, producer, and writer. For her last film, A Call to Spies, Sarah wrote the original screenplay, plays Virginia Hall, and produced the film. Sarah's previous feature was the groundbreaking Equity, in which he created the concept, co-wrote the story, produced and co-starred. Equity is the first female-driven Wall Street thriller. The film premiered in dramatic competition at the Sundance Film Festival, where it sold to Sony Pictures Classics. The New York Times made Equity a critic's pick when it was released theatrically nationwide. The Hollywood Reporter reviewed Sarah's performance as subtle but gutsy. Sarah was honored with a Women's Image Network Award, the Creative Coalition Spotlight Award, and the Voice of a Woman Award. Sarah starred in the romance drama Backwards opposite James Vanderbeek, and has appeared in various television shows like LA Law and SVU. She starred in numerous off-Broadway productions, a graduate of Williams College and Shipley, I might add. Sarah trained at Drama Studio London. She is part of Fortune's Most Powerful Women Next Generation, has appeared on various shows from The Today Show to Bloomberg to CNN and Sky. She resides in New York City with her husband and son. I think she's in Philadelphia these days, and that's it. So thank you.
Sure. So I guess I'll just start by saying a little bit about the film, and then you want to ask some questions?
Yeah, that'd be great. Go ahead.
So yeah, I am in Philly these days since the pandemic. But anyway, A Call to Spy, which is out now, is basically the first film on 3 diverse female spies in Churchill's secret army. And these women are actually subject of many new books. If people have read Craig Growley's Hall of Mirrors or A Woman of No Importance. The 3 women in this film are Virginia Hall, Vera Atkins, and Noor Nayat Khan. And it's really just a spy thriller that examines women who put their lives on the line for freedom. And it was distributed by IFC Films. It was shot largely in Philadelphia, believe it or not. We shot, for reasons of economy, since this is an indie film, in Philadelphia and Budapest for France and London. And some of the locations in the film are Dawson Estate on the main line, which is the home of the family that inspired the Philadelphia story. We shot there for like 10 days, and many other, Newland Grist Mall, restaurants here, the Art Alliance, lots of places.
It's a great movie. We have now seen it. I've seen it a few times now, and it's really exciting. I will say, if I can take 30 seconds, my particular interest in this was piqued because in my family history, my great uncle, who is the brother of my grandmother, was for 18 years the director of training for the CIA, and the first director of training for the CIA. And so growing up, I had heard a lot of lore and about him, and I thought it'd be interesting just to share. This is interesting just to share a couple of things. This letter is the letter that was written to Michael Matt by Alan Dulles. I don't know if you can see that. That's pretty neat. And then I have another letter that was written to him by Richard Helm. And you can see right there, it says Director of CIA right there. It's pretty neat. And then here's his retirement certificate. They actually give you one of these and they give you a gold watch, I think. So, and then here's a picture. It's a picture of my Uncle Matt in sort of work attire. That's what he looked like when he was working. And then when they dressed him up in his Princeton finery, this is what he looked like. So, you know. Anyway, so that's that. And I just thought it was great. And I probably watched Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and read the book, 100 times now, and other things like that. I read all the Alan First books. And so anyway, so I'm going to ask Sarah, just break the ice. What got you interested in this subject matter?
Yeah, I've always been interested in spy films, and I love Tinker Tailor, I love 1917, Dunkirk, etc. But when women's stories are involved, it tends to be more of a romance, or they're involved in the medical services as nurses. And what I felt that we were missing was a look at the psychology of what it's like to be a female spy on the ground, specifically in World War II, the day in and day out grit and determination these women had. And so, I studied World War II extensively at Williams College. I actually played Ava Braun off Broadway in New York in my early 20s. And so when I just started digging around the research and found, there were actually 39 women in F section of Churchill's Secret Army, but I chose 3 to focus on because they were pioneers and firsts in their respective spy fields.
That's great. Is there going to be a sequel?
We shall see. I'm actually developing the miniseries spinoff right now, so we'll see. We'll see where that goes.
Look at that. Well, so let me back up then. What got you interested in making movies?
Well, when I was very little, I went to Gladwin Elementary. I always wanted to be an actress, and my parents, Reggie and Frank Thomas, if any of you know them, are 2 lawyers. And they were like, yeah, no. But they indulged in terms of, I took acting class, but then I also got involved in sports, etc. But by the time I got to college, kind of my passion hadn't really changed. And I was a drama major, and then I went to graduate school in acting in London. So that really was my background. And came back to New York City, and just basically all the roles I was getting were quite boring. Girl Next Door, I did soap opera, it was the New York Times commercial girl. They were just kind of very vanilla, and I wasn't seeing or inspired by what I was seeing in films either, in terms of strong female roles. And so I just decided to do it, create the roles in movies. And more important than that, the stories that I wanted to see on screen. With Equity, we've never seen a female-driven Wall Street movie before that. And Wall Street movies are great, but why are women always the sidekick or the romance, or why can't they just be the powerful women?
Yeah, you've played a lot of different roles. You've been a rower and a spy, a Wall Street person. And what's your next role going to be?
Well, for the immediate future, I am a mom to a newborn girl. So I'd like to be a mom for a month. And that's what I'm hoping to do in December, is just kind of shut it all down. But my next role, we'll see. Whatever it is, I'm obviously really passionate about kind of these untold stories of strong women in commercial genres. Yeah.
And who wrote the story for? Did you write the story for the spy story? Or?
Yeah. So I wrote it's an original screenplay, and I actually did 4 years of research based on, I had access to these spy files, which are public, right? They're in the archives. The CIA museum and individuals within the CIA were very helpful, because Virginia Hall, the character I play, was the first woman to work for the CIA after the war. And, once I told everyone I was going to be making this movie, the doors just opened, because people really do want to see these stories on screen. And so everyone was so helpful with the research.
Yeah, great. So you did everything. You produced it, you wrote it, you filmed it, you acted in it, directed it.
Oh, I didn't direct it though. That's the one thing I didn't do, but maybe next time. So we have a fantastic director, Lydia Dean Pilcher, who I hired precisely for the reason you said. You can't do everything. You have to bring on a team.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Okay. I don't want to steal everybody's thunder here. Let me see. Who else has a question? let's see if we can get some other people to ask some questions here.
So if you want to add your questions in the chat as well, or raise your hand in the chat, we can get to you in that way as well.
Hi, Baird and Caitlin, it's Eamon. Can you hear me? Am I off mute?
Yeah, we can hear you.
You're great.
Terrific. Good to meet you. And I'm sorry I joined a few minutes late. I had to get rid of a nuisance business call. How did you finance the film? What was the financing difficulty as you were putting it together? And then can you also talk just about post-production distribution and so forth? How have you launched the film and festivals or what have you?
So on the finance side, with all my films, it's a combination of tax credits and individual investors. My last film, Equity, I was lucky enough, we did make a profit when we sold to Sony at Sundance. So I was able to retain a large portion of my investor pool to kind of come back for another film because it's lots of fun. But this was a bigger budget and I did have to go wider with investors. And what I found in terms of fundraising is it's always difficult. I thought it would be easier this time around. No, you get tons and tons of no. But finding, much like a piece of art on a wall, like finding people to join your investor group who are passionate about the story in some way and want to see it made above and beyond the profit because, movie making is a high risk investment. So what I mean by that is, with this film specifically, it's the first film here, Noor Inayat Khan, who is a legend in Europe, a war hero, and the Indian American community here opened up their doors and they really wanted to see this story told on screen in the right way. So I found investors there. I found investors who went to Williams College. I would write cold letters. I found investors who really loved spy films, but did, like me, want to see a more female angle. So that's how I went about the investing. And then once you get some investors, we throw parties and we say, come on, friends, join, that kind of stuff. And then you asked about distribution, finance, etc. So the film, we were lucky enough that the film actually did premiere prior to the pandemic on the festival circuit. It had started. So that was amazing just because I made this film for the big screen and it's devastating that theaters, aren't open to be playing it in the wide way that they would have. But we did, we played in Canada, we played in the UK. We're actually playing in a festival, the British Palace Festival in Australia right now. We won the Anti-Defamation League at Santa Barbara, which was January, and then everything kind of shut down. So we don't really do virtual film festivals. We had to cancel a lot of those, like Nantucket, et cetera, because of piracy concerns, which is unfortunate because, again, with an independent film, that's really how you build your audience, is working the circuit. But I'm very lucky that IFC Films picked it up for domestic. So it's out now nationwide, everywhere, Amazon, iTunes, etc., Comcast, Verizon. And then it's also out internationally in the UK, and it's coming to theaters in Australia and India.
Sarah, you mentioned that you filmed in Philadelphia and Budapest. Can you talk a little bit more about filming in Philadelphia, where your locations were? Anne just mentions in the chat that you guys filmed at Ardrossan.
Yeah, we did. I don't think we could have made this movie without Ardrossan, frankly, because it was a low budget indie, and what we didn't have the funding for was set dressing everything for a period piece, which is very expensive. So we had to largely, except for the signal room, which was a build by our amazing production designer, we had to largely find spaces that we could just shoot. And, with Ardrossan, it is a fully dressed period mansion that is a replica of the family's ancestral home in Scotland, which is where these spies historically trained. They historically trained in mansions. So we had a historical fit, fully dressed period furniture. They'd never let a film in to shoot before. But Joni knew my mom through the years of Philadelphia, and so was amenable to bringing an indie film in. And then we did kind of, excuse me, what indie films do. So we shot the whole first floor that was like the fancy, fully furnished period room for the training, but then we went to the basement and we shot the torture scene there. And then we went to the third floor and we dressed it for inside Paris. And then we went to the corner tree over here and it was Scotland, and the corner tree over there was London. So it was a lot of kind of cut and paste. And then by going to Budapest and getting the real scale, with the extras and the trucks, etc. When you're cutting and pasting in that room, it actually works for scale, which it wouldn't have without that Budapest piece.
Yeah. I noticed you had the Spring Mill Cafe in there, and I went through it and I couldn't find that scene. What scene was that? We go there all the time. It's great.
So that's a funny story. So I went on a first date at the Spring Mill Cafe when I was 15 years old, which is how I know about the Spring Mill Cafe, because it was like my first like fancy date, right? So and obviously it was a good date because I remembered the restaurant. But anyway, we were looking for a French restaurant, which is the scene where Virginia Hall almost gets caught with she orders alcohol on the Sunday.
Oh yeah, right.
That's the Spring Mill. But actually, again, much like independent filmmaking, we didn't just shoot that scene there. The Spring Mill Cafe restaurant also has like a back house that they use for special events. And that's the area we used for the killing. And that's the interior we used for waiting for the prison rescue. So we really used all the space.
Oh, that's great. Come on, Anne, you have a question? He's shy.
So was that the primary place in Philadelphia that you filmed at, just in Ardrossan, or were you also around in other places?
We were in a lot of places. We did Newland Grist Mill, so it's a real working mill. So we use that for the French mills. We did our only big set dress was the signal room. Like you had to build a signal room. And we did that at the Art Alliance. I'd actually knew about the Art Alliance because we used the restaurant in my first film. But the Art Alliance has this kind of third floor that was basically empty, but appropriate to period. So even like the screening room with Vera and Buckmaster, we shot that. All the Buckmaster and Vera offices were there. So that was like a 1 week set. We shot at the Curtis Center. That was kind of the end of the film when America comes into the war. So yeah, we shot so many places, not my parents' house. So for my first film, we shot inside my parents' house for like 2 weeks, and that's never happening again. But that really is the challenge with a period, low budget indie. You know, you can't just find a friendly restaurant. You have to find a friendly restaurant that's period appropriate.
Yeah.
Anne also asks in the chat, she said the costumes are really great. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah, so Vanessa Porter did an amazing, amazing job. I did not know Vanessa prior to hiring her. I just had seen her work in some Sundance films and a Sony Classics film called Novitiate. And, you know, she had a tiny budget and was able to pull costumes from so many different countries. I mean, we got some of the costumes from like LA, right? You know, soldiers, uniforms, etc. But some came from Poland. And she really found a way to make it work. I have no idea how she put it all together for what she had, but she did. And then also when we got to Budapest, you know, we partnered with a female-led production company there, Pioneer Pictures, and they do a lot of stuff. Like they do The Crown when The Crown comes in town to shoot. And so we shipped the costumes that had to be a match, but then, you know, they had a lot of costumes as well in their kit.
So there's another question in the chat. Does Philadelphia make it a welcome place to film?
I love shooting in Philadelphia. I think Philly's a great place to shoot. I think every city has complications, right? So if you're shooting, even with my last film, New York City for Philadelphia or London, Philadelphia, that's difficult, but the people are so nice. And frankly, the tax credit is the reason that I come here from a financial perspective. It's 25%. You know, Sharon Pinkinson's amazing at helping not just the big films, but the little films get access to that tax credit and financing. But the crews are wonderful. And there's so much talent here. I mean, there's so much talent here.
So you used a local crew then in Philadelphia? We
did. We used local crew. Well, it's a mix. So we always bring kind of department heads from New York City, or LA really, just because that's how it usually happens. But yes, there was a lot of local actors, and a majority of the crew was local. Yeah. And a lot that I worked with before, you know, in my previous films. And it was actually fun because, you know, over the course of a decade, someone who might have been a PA on my first film is no longer a PA. They've moved up the ranks. And so it's really nice to have that kind of a family feel.
So what is your process for finding the actors? I thought the acting was great, but I also noticed a lot of recognizable faces that I've seen in other things. What is your process for finding the right actors for your characters?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of it, it's combination. It's a combination of casting and offers of recognizable people who you like their work. This film was particularly challenging because, you know, we cast actors from India, Canada, Germany, France, the UK, Philadelphia. I mean, like just making it feel authentic required authentic actors. I'm not a huge fan of people putting on accents personally, just in a style. I like to find the real thing. So in terms of Radhika Apte, who plays Noor, this was her American film debut. She's a huge star in India, massive. And I knew her from an indie film called Parched. And in fact, I was interviewing the director of Parched for the directing job. And that's how I came across Radhika in looking at the director's work. And the director vouched for her as, you know, someone easy to work with and talented, etc. And Radhika was and Lydia, our director, also knew Radhika simultaneously through having given her awards. So she was our first offer. And we just made an offer and she said yes, which is, that's the only time in my entire career where I've made an offer and the first person says yes in terms of actors. So that was just incredible because it was important for us that it was an authentic actress for that role. Linus was an offer. Stana Katic and I share the same entertainment lawyer and he'd pitched her for a while. And then a lot of the roles, our casting director was Heidi Levitt. And what a casting director does is they bring you the talent, but also they help direct you towards what talent to focus on because there are so many auditions. It's impossible to focus on absolutely everyone for every role. And Heidi did an amazing job of just bringing together this team of known and unknown actors.
We have another question in the chat. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Stanish.
I'm pointing to the chat. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. From Morgan, she says, I didn't know anything about women spies in World War II, so I love learning about it from the movie. And I really like that women in various roles have been your focus. I'm curious what future projects you have in mind.
Well, you know, I did a panel a couple weeks ago with CIA personnel, and they were pitching me a few additional female spies in different genres that would make great films. Which is interesting, but I don't know, you know, how I work with all my films is they're all about 4 years. They're all 7 days a week for 4 years. I see them all the way through. Then I tend to take a month or two just to creatively get the creative flow back and then look for these types of stories, because for an independent film to break out or have a chance of breaking out, in my view, they have to be original content and something that hasn't been done before and have a commercial hook. And finding something that checks all three of those boxes is very difficult, is the main challenge.
Can I ask one more question, Barrett, if you'll forgive me? I apologize if this was asked earlier on. As I mentioned, I joined late. The CIA had you on a panel, and of course, for the first time, we have a woman leading the CIA, at least when I last checked. This morning, she still was. I talked that she won't be. During the Second World War, your spies that were hired by Churchill and so forth were in the British force. Did the CIA or the OSS, rather, during the war, have women involved? Are there American stories similarly? Maybe that's what the CIA people were pitching to you.
Well, what they were pitching was actually later on in time. They had some ideas, but so the OSS was the precursor to the CIA. The CIA was not till, and the OSS joined forces with the SOE later on in the war. Our film starts with the SOE in 1941 when, you know, women were put in as to spy as an experiment, including my character, who was an American and was rejected from serving from her country, essentially, because she was a woman and she was had a disability, had a wooden leg.
Right,
She
right.
wanted to be a diplomat, and the US said no many times for no good reason. So she spied for the British. So, you know, the SOE and the OSS, and that is in the film at the end of the film, did ultimately work together. And then the OSS with Wild Bill Donovan became the CIA. And then Virginia Hall became the first woman to work for the CIA after the war.
And you may not know this, but our moderator, Baird Standish, has a familial connection to the CIA through his uncle. He may fill us in on that.
Yeah, I actually made a little.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you know, showed some little letters that
Wonderful.
Ellis and Richard Helms had written to him, and you know, I have a big scrapbook of stuff from him. So
Terrific.
yeah.
We have another question in the chat from Christian. How long do you think it will take the movie industry to recover from COVID? Financing, festivals, distribution, etc.
That's a great question. I think a very, 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 very long time in the independent world. I'm only speaking in the independent film world. I think the studios are working now. You know, the Netflix and the world have the money to get the testing, quarantine hundreds of people for 2 weeks somewhere and make it very safe, or as safe as it can be. And they can shoot in areas where COVID is not as widespread. Independent filmmakers don't have that luxury. We don't have a penny extra. In fact, we're always raising more money. There is no real insurance for COVID. If you have a shutdown on an independent film, most of the time you are done. That's it. That's the end of your movie. And I don't see how you don't have 7 figures for COVID safety. I mean, you have to build that in the budget. And then how do you raise that? You say to investors, can I have $1 million just for COVID protocol? I think there's going to be a big gap if you want to know my honest thoughts on that. And I think it's really, really unfortunate because I don't know how the indies get back safely till after there's a vaccine and after this kind of goes away a lot. In terms of festivals, you know, it's the same thing. You know, we're at AFM right now selling some foreign, and everything's just gone virtual. So I guess people are being very innovative, but again, in the indie film level, if you can't be there in person and see the audience reaction, you're not going to have the big sales because distributors, how are they going to know how audiences are reacting, et cetera? So I think we have to continue to be innovative and think outside the box. But I think it's a really devastating thing for the independent film world. Sorry.
This is Christian. Just as a follow-up, my niece is a set decorator on indie and feature films, and actually, as is her boyfriend, and they're leaving Brooklyn today. They've just signed on for a new movie in Albuquerque, so they're driving to Albuquerque as opposed to flying. But apparently, all the shooting will be done outside, so their issue is just housing and things like that. But it's very impactful. They did get some government relief, as I recall, about 6-8 weeks ago. I think there was some kind of funding that came through for folks in the industry, but it's been a very big struggle because she's union but freelance.
But even as actors, like how do you act? I mean, you spit when you like you spit when you act, you're touching, you're kissing in some scenes. Like, how do you even film those things? Because there's no such thing as social distancing in most films. I don't know. Even like, it'll be interesting to see, and I haven't really thought about this, but even in the studio films, how, if at all, it affects kind of performance. If, you know, if you're acting with someone who's socially distant, wearing a mask, etc. I don't know. Be interesting.
It's difficult.
Anything else?
Here's one. And here we go. How has living in Philadelphia been for you?
Great. I love Philly.
Yeah.
I mean, I went from a apartment in Soho that was 1,000 square feet to a full brownstone. So I don't even know what to do with all the space. But yeah, we're just renting, you know, short term while we kind of wait it out a little with a little more space given the newborn. But I love Philadelphia. It's great.
Yeah. It's a great place, no doubt.
Eagles fan. I'm an Eagles fan. My husband's a Cowboys fan, so that's sometimes a problem.
Oh, no.
Yes, he sleeps on the couch twice a year.
Oh well, I have that problem because having lived in Pittsburgh, I'm a Steelers fan, and people look at me a little askew, So.
My dad grew up in Pittsburgh. He's also a Steelers fan.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. In fact, a funny story. My sister's not a football person, and my grandfather, before he passed, this was way back, like when they were in the Super Bowl, he sent us in the mail terrible towels. And my sister called me up and she's like, Grandpa's lost it. He sent a yellow towel in the mail. Like she didn't understand. Like just gets a towel in the mail and she's like, what is he doing?
What is that? Yeah.
We have a whole collection of terrible towels, let me tell you. Camo terrible towels. We got them all here. Maybe we'll send one to Christopher.
Yeah. That's it properly. It's terrible towel. A terrible towel.
We have another question in the chat. This one's from Meredith. How do you find the music for your films?
Yeah, it depends on if it's score or music. So actually in my first film, I had the Hooters, who are a Philadelphia band, write an end song. We agreed on a small indie fee and they wrote the end song just for the film. And actually were helpful in securing Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time in the movie because one of the Hooters co-wrote the song with her. In this scenario, for A Call to Spy, I mean, almost the entire film is score. And as an independent film, like we didn't have financing for kind of a big orchestra, which is a problem, right? So I hired an amazingly talented NYU grad composer. This was only her second film. And frankly, it was a risk, and she knocked it out of the ballpark. She composed, you commission the music, you own the music. She composed the entire score. I mean, we had a couple background songs like the accordion, etc., but it's largely her music, and it's largely her and her friends playing the music when they went to record. So it goes to show that you can certainly bet on young women, young talented women, to do the job and just give them the opportunity.
You had mentioned previously about the research. Can you speak a little bit more about how much time you put into the research, where you found everything, how historically accurate is the film?
Yeah, so the big fiction, so to speak, in the film is that Virginia Hall and Noor Inayat Khan never met, right? They were 2 years apart in the war. They were in different parts of France. So what I did as the writer is, because they were first in their field, Virginia was the first female field agent and Noor was the first female wireless, and they were from different nationalities, different religions. One was a fighter, one was a pacifist. I thought putting them together in time and space while staying true to the arc of what happened to them in real life would allow for a more global story about how people can unite despite diversity or differences. So in terms of how accurate is the movie, the arc of what happened to all three of these women in real life is in the film. And it was very, very important to me that that was retained and that this is a film that honors their legacy and their heroism. Where I took liberties had to do with story, or budget. For example, Virginia Hall is very famous for a prison break. In real life, she did an epic prison break that could be a whole movie, right? And we certainly didn't have the real estate in this movie or the budget to do some massive prison break. But it was really important to me to make sure that there was a prison break in the film. So there is a prison break, and it's just done in a different way than she specifically did it. So those were the types of liberties. But for example, when Noor's caught, you see in this film, she tries to escape twice. That's true. She did try and escape twice. So her last words were liberté. There's a lot of details that are very accurate to what happened to these women.
I have a question. A while ago, I'd read a couple fiction books about World War II, and I just, it's a depressing period of time, really. So I told myself no more World War II things for a while. So I made an exception to watch this movie ahead of this talk. I'm curious how you spent 4 years researching it and without letting it get you down too much. I mean, these women were incredible, but it's, it's a lot of sadness.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you focus on, for me, I was focused on their heroism and the drive that their stories need to be told. Their stories are not in the history books. Their stories should be in the history books. So there was an inspiring mission to it all, as opposed to choosing to focus on, the devastation of World War II. But, of course, there are days that you're like, you really don't want to be, you're not emotionally ready to dive in, right? It's really, really tough. And on those days, I'd try and focus on different things like fundraising or logistics or, paperwork, and then try and get back into it. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry. And I'm just like sitting here nursing a baby. So I think I'm like particularly sensitive to it right now. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I think there are so many World War II films. And I think the reason for that is this kind of, it's almost like Star Wars, good versus evil. And when there is evil, what do you do? And I think that's really the message of the film, or the takeaway that I want audiences to have, is to think about what would I do? Like if I was told I have a 50-50 chance of survival, you mentioned you're a mom, I'm a mom, I have a baby, a newborn, would I sign up to fight for freedom for all like these women did? And I honestly hope I would, but I don't know. And I think we have to all ask ourselves that uncomfortable question of, what would we do to stand up for what we believe in addition to voting,
Yeah, I don't know the answer either. It's, when you are growing up and you think you definitely be one of the good guys, but then as an adult, when you think, oh, but I want to protect my babies, you think, what would I do? So anyway, I thought about these questions while I was watching a movie.
Totally.
Do we have any other questions for Sarah? Give everybody a second to get to the chat if they're doing that. But thank you for joining us. This was really awesome, and we really enjoyed. I mean, I particularly enjoyed the film, and it was really interesting to hear you speak about it. So thank you for joining us, and we hope to get you to visit the club soon. Well, when it's safe, that'd be really great. Have you ever been to the Racquet Club?
I have never been to the Racquet Club, so I would absolutely love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
It'd be a good set for one of these movies,
It's true.
Yeah.
You know what? Don't offer it if you don't want me to come to you, because I will.
It'd be like the Dirty Dozen too, or something like that.
Yeah, I'll find a way to use the location.
It's also Trumbauer. It's another Trumbauer building.
Yeah.
That's true. Sarah, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time today. And we're going to post this later for, again, as I mentioned, for our members. And I will post the trailer link. So we had a little snafu in the beginning, but they will see the full trailer and the link again to where they can buy it or rent it if they have not yet done so.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again.
Thank you.